So, what I'm going to talk about is something that myself, Chelsea, and Dawn have started exploring and taking a look at since we now have the data from Egypt, the US, UGA, et cetera, et cetera. And part of the point is we have some new opportunities to start looking at things across the different cultures that we've collected data in, particularly in this last round. We have multiple sets. We have the UGA set, we have the Duke data that came from both the school and the community sample, Egypt, Morocco. And one of the things that's very nice that we have is we have this nice collection of both identities and behaviors that are shared between all of these data sets we've collected. Roughly, by my quick count, was around 250 identities and about 200 behaviors. And so there are a lot of different ways in which we can actually go about looking at this and seeing, actually examining the different cultures and where there is more agreement and where there's less agreement. And one of the places where we've done this before and where we've looked at things is with events. And that's in events and then the likelihood of the events, the deflection that is produced if we actually calculate the actual each set of events. And some of the questions that we can look at is, where's their agreement if we actually take a look at each of the different possible events we can generate? Where's their disagreement? And there are a lot of different combinations we can examine, but not all combinations of actors and objects and behaviors are very likely. And one of the things that we've been talking about so much over the last few days is institutions. And so this is where we're starting and what we're actually trying to look at. And McKinnon and Heiss book, you all talked about how important institutions are, and Chelsea has been talking about these quite a bit recently. And thus, we can really come around to the question of how much agreement do we have in the different institutions, and what can we look at? So, does the level of agreement about the likelihood of an event occurring vary based on the institution in which the actors are interacting? Of course, Brent started talking about this a little bit and hinting at it. And looking at this cross-culturally, so we have, particularly, are there different institutions where there's more or less agreement between the US sample and the Egyptian sample? And that's what we've started trying to look at with this. And so, yeah.
15 million events?
So I took the collection that we had of all of the shared identities and behaviors, combined them in every single way that they could be combined, and calculated the deflection, leading to 13,020,210 different individual events. So this is, like I say, all possible combinations of A, B, and O that is shared between the US and Egypt dictionaries. The equations that I used were the the Egyptian equations that we've already seen presented on here, and the US ANOVA equations. And there was one thing that we found pretty quickly after we put this together. Deflection was incompatible in a raw form because there are a different number of there are different numbers of factors that are actually being kept in. So what would be low deflecting in, from the US equation would not be, as far as the actual deflection score, would not be the same if we actually took and looked at it in Egypt because of the number of factors that are involved. So I just standardized them with a z-score, so we had a standardized range and a standardized understanding of, okay, how far do we go? And then generated a difference score so we can actually see how different this standardized deflection level is using the absolute value of the Egyptian standardized deflection minus the US standardized deflection. So we just get a distance between the two deflection scores once they've been standardized. And also coded for the institutional MRE over time. Coded for the institutional identification of both actors. So if they were not in the same institution in for both of the actors that were involved, we marked it as inconsistent, and we used that as a comparator. So using inconsistent, that includes 9,244,200 of them. So that's a lot of them. The average difference score between them was about half of 1 point. U.S. standardized deflection was negative 0.0004, so right at 0. Average Egyptian, right at 0. And correlation between the U.S. and Egypt standardized deflection was 0.6339. So they're still pretty similar. And yeah, I'm completely over time, but just to give you a quick look, I can stop after this one. If you'll want to see some of the other measures that I've done, we can talk about it in just a little bit. This is just the average deflection score difference by rated institution, starting with lay. So this is kind of the, and here's the inconsistent level. So you can kind of see which ones were higher, which ones were lower than there. So academic was quite a bit higher. Family, as far as this distance, was higher. Once I actually ran correlations, that one was actually very close. So there's a few different measures that we're starting to look at as far as trying to get an idea about how these are, where they're similar and where they're not. And I'll just stop there since I am out of time. But thank you guys.